Let's be honest, modern medicine is broken. Patients are dismissed, doctors are exhausted, and mental health care is decades behind. So it's time to disrupt the status quo, to challenge a system that fragments care, dehumanizes patients, and burns out clinicians. I'm Dr. Georgine Nanos, and this is The Kind Revolution, a podcast about breaking old paradigms, rebuilding medicine with compassion and science, and reimagining what healthcare can be when we finally get it right. Because change is here, and it's starting with us. Welcome to the revolution. Welcome back to the Kind Revolution podcast. I'm Dr. Georgine Nanos, board-certified family physician and founder of the Kind Health Group, and someone who believes that medicine works best when science and humanity operate together. Today's guest practices at one of the most high-stakes intersections in medicine, the human heart. Dr. Alexandra Kharazi is a board-certified cardiothoracic surgeon dedicated to excellence in heart and lung surgery and deeply committed to advancing healthcare for women. She is also the author of Heart of Fear, a raw and honest exploration of the internal conflicts and fears shared by professionals in distinctly different yet surprisingly comparable fields. Born in Kiev and raised by immigrant parents, she has built a career defined by precision, resilience, and courage, both inside and outside the operating room. She's also a mother, a skydiver, and someone passionate about helping women understand and protect their health. Today, we're going to be talking about women and cardiovascular disease, fear and high performance, the physiology of stress, prevention and empowerment, and what it really takes to be a leader under pressure. Dr. Kharazi, welcome to the Kind Revolution. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me.
So you are the daughter of immigrants and began your life in Kiev. How did your upbringing shape your work ethic and your perspective on opportunity in medicine?
Well, I think we all come from different walks of life. And I think what's important about it is everyone's perspective is shaped by the values that they have growing up. So I think for my parents, what I got, and whether or not that is due to because they were immigrants or not, is I'll never be able to know because I've never not been shot. Kind of hard to say, but as far as their work ethic, I definitely got that from them. They say kids learn by example, and I definitely learned that, hard work and definitely being able to persevere through the hard aspects of a job and having even with my parents having multiple jobs, right? That is what I learned.
Yeah, I could definitely identify with that. I'm the child of Greek immigrants, so I totally get it. The work ethic was deeply ingrained, right?
Yeah, definitely deeply ingrained.
Excuse me. Okay, so was there a defining moment when you knew cardiothoracic surgery was your path? Because that is one of the probably the most intense path in medicine. Tell me about that.
I didn't have a defining moment per se. For me, it was following the traditional pathway. And as I advanced through my medical training, it really felt like a calling to me. And when I first started in medical school, I went to medical school to be a family medicine doctor. And to me, I wanted to treat the whole person. And I wanted to treat kids, and I wanted to treat people of all ages. And I also wanted to do procedures as well. And so for me, it was that aspect that I still bring into my cases, even now, of practicing whole body medicine. And I thought that that would best be served by being a family practitioner. And as I went through my rotations in medical school, it really didn't hit the spot, so to speak. And a lot of that's because I didn't really, it was almost like that practice was limited for family medicine. And I wasn't actually able to do everything that I thought I would want to do. And actually family medicine doctors were referring a lot of their patients out. And so I think when you think of family medicine and what primary care doctors do, what I had in mind was something that is, I think, still accepted in a lot of rural places, or maybe in like the 90s, the way they used to practice then. But definitely in modern day cities, that's not what I was seeing as a medical student anymore. And simultaneously, I was also really drawn to surgery. I was very good at it. And so that definitely inspired me. And then I found that taking care of really sick patients in the ICU and being able to almost like resurrect them, so to speak, was the most amazing thing. And I found that to me, that really felt like a calling. And as I progressed through my training, all of those things were really met in cardiothoracic surgery, and particularly with cardiac surgery. So yeah, that's really been my journey, and I have to say that after all of that, I still get to do that. And as a cardiothoracic surgeon, you think of us as subspecialists, but in fact, I still treat the whole patient. Like I still treat the whole body. Like I still practice whole body medicine on my cardiac patients, and especially the people that are in the ICU after surgery, they really need attention to the whole body. So yes, we operate on the heart, but we look at the nutritional status, we look at functional status, we look at all the other functions of the body, whether or not somebody's suffering from memory loss, et cetera. So all of that really plays into how someone does, because my goal as a cardiothoracic surgeon is to return someone to their quality of life or better, right?
Yeah.
Like not just fix the economic issue. So in fact, those things that I was seeking in other fields going along, I ended up bringing to cardiothoracic surgery. And that's been very valuable and really enhanced my relationship with the people that I operate on.
That's beautiful. I don't hear many surgeons speak about their profession that way. So I think you're I think that's a great way to put it. And you're in a unique position to do so. Tell me, one of the things I'm really passionate about is women and heart health. And heart disease is still the leading cause of death in women and men, yet many women don't see themselves at risk. Why is this still so underestimated? What's your thoughts? And let's dive into it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So actually, it's like 56% of women aren't even aware that it's our number one killer.
Hmm.
And it's responsible for 1 in 3 deaths, female deaths annually, which is a huge number. And so I think that there's several different things that contribute to this. So firstly, we're more likely to be asymptomatic and present with atypical symptoms. So what does that mean? So when you think of heart disease, a lot of people who don't have a medical background often associate this with crushing chest pain, falling to the floor. It's been termed the Hollywood heart attack. And so what this means is basically it's the most widely depicted picture of heart disease throughout movies and shows, and what comes to our awareness, right? And so we see that, but the problem with that depiction is it fails to capture this full spectrum of how heart disease presents. So for example, with women particularly, we're more likely to have atypical symptoms. So what does that mean? That means that it's symptoms outside of this classic presentation of chest pain. So yes, we do still have chest pain, but we're more likely to have dizziness, heartburn, shortness of breath, these types of symptoms that are more vague. And so it's harder for our doctors to diagnose them. So women are more likely to be underdiagnosed and misdiagnosed. And actually, the scary thing is oftentimes it can often be silent. So your first symptom is that acute event, whether that be an occlusion of one of the major arteries of the heart or a progression in heart failure. And now we're in these heart failure symptoms. And that's the first time women are getting plugged into the system. So as you can imagine, if women are more likely to be misdiagnosed and underdiagnosed, they tend to present at later stages of their heart disease.
Which makes those first events usually much more fatal than in men, right?
As a cardiac surgeon, I definitely see that, right? So I see a higher number of women presenting in what we call with heart failure symptoms. So instead of getting that workup early so we can find the disease, I'll give you the example of coronary artery disease, right? Which means that there's blockages in the major arteries of the heart. So over time, that heart muscle stops functioning properly. So the heart is not pumping as efficiently, right? But because oftentimes men are more likely to be diagnosed with this and women are more likely to go undetected for so long, by the time they're getting to me to get surgery, the surgery is higher risk because the heart muscle doesn't work as well. So that's why this really is a women's health cardiac surgery issue as well. And it's so close to my heart to talk about all this.
Yeah. What are some myths around this that you'd like to dispel that frustrate you the most for our listeners?
The biggest one is I'm young, so I can worry about this later. And heart disease kind of has this rap of being, an older person's disease. And that's actually not true.
They don't have to worry about this now. What is reality?
The reality is just because you're young doesn't mean that you're not at risk for a major cardiac event. Over 40% of women that are over are living with form of cardiovascular disease, one killer, right? So just because you're not at risk. That's myth number one. And myth number two is I feel fine. So I don't need to get a cardiac workup. So a lot of the risk factors. So let's talk about the risk factors. Cardiac
Yeah.
pressure, high cholesterol, smoking, family history, diabetes are the major ones, right? And a lot of those are silent killers. And the reason is because they can go for a long time being completely asymptomatic. So unless you actively are seeking a cardiac workup or are talking to your doctor about it, these may go undetected until the time that you do have a complication. So that's the second most common myth. And the third most common myth is that, I'm just slowing down and this is not a symptom of heart disease. I've operated on multiple patients that just thought that they were getting older, and particularly with women, were told that this is like perimenopause or menopause, when in fact they had severe blockages. I'll tell you a story. Like, I had a patient who had severe aortic stenosis, and she was in her late 80s. I want to say she was in her late 80s. It was several years ago, but she was just told that she was slowing down because she was getting older. And finally, when this was found, she ended up needing open heart surgery to get it fixed. And then by the time she saw me in the office, she's like, "Oh, I'm gardening again. I haven't been doing that for years. It's been really limiting her ability." But really, that was a major thing that was really limiting her. And because of her advanced age and other medical problems, she was told, "Oh, this is just an age related thing." Not so. It was actually a structural problem that needed fixing.
That's wild. Even in her late 80s, she could get some vitality back just from, taking action. Yeah, that says a lot.
Yeah.
Let's talk about a little bit about perimenopause and menopause. What actually happens to cardiovascular risk during perimenopause and menopause? And, there's so much, we've evolved so much when it comes to hormone therapy, and it's very nuanced when it comes to cardiac health. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So these are such individual and everybody's so different. And it really depends on and what your symptoms are. So, and that's all the more to plug with someone, particularly around time. I see a lot in like early 50s, and there's all sorts of symptoms, and it's hard to sort out what could be potentially menopause symptoms from true cardiac disease. But just having it, so the key to prevention is awareness always, right? So, but just having that at the forefront of our minds, particularly as we talk to our doctors and being proactive about it and advocating for ourselves, and telling them, like, I should be getting a cardiac workup. And why am I not? And if they think you don't need a cardiac workup, it's okay to ask why not. And if you feel like you're not being heard, it's okay to get a second opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what are some of the more underutilized tools in cardiac risk reduction for women? I know in my practice, I always order a lipid NMR. I don't do the standard panel. We order a lot of APOBs and lipoprotein little a's, and then we do a lot of coronary CT angiograms, which is kind of not the norm. But what do you recommend?
Yeah, so you nailed a lot of the practical stuff, but I will say as a surgeon who deals with women, it really is a specific population, and a lot of the risk stratification that goes into deciding whether or not somebody needs cardiac surgery, for example, does not fully capture the risk that women have. And I'll give you an example of this. So if you were to come into my office and you needed open heart surgery, say you needed a cabbage. So what that means is I would have to open your chest and bypass the blockages that are in your heart. And some of the tools that I would use to guide your risk stratification to tell you what to expect post-op, it would be like a risk calculator model. I use the STS risk score, and there's several different factors in this, right? So we've got the number of blockages, we've got your kidney function, you've got the function of your heart, what your ejection fraction is, how efficiently the heart is pumping, and so on and so forth. You've got a lot of factors in there. So it gives us some idea. So it puts you in a risk category, so to speak, that really guides our decision making. But this model is by no means perfect for men or women, but particularly for women, it doesn't capture the caregiving burden, for example. It doesn't capture frailty burden as well. And so there's And once again, all we do know that our hormonal changes influence cardiac outcomes, but that's not included anywhere in that specific risk stratification model. So it's a guide for us to use as clinicians, but it's such an individualized discussion because there's so many things that aren't captured in our traditional modeling, you know? So I
Yeah.
would definitely say that with women particularly, we know that their lifestyle is going to influence outcomes. So I really make sure as a surgeon, I get to know what those factors are, like what kind of socioeconomic burden is that woman facing? Is she the primary caregiver for her entire family? You know, these things are all going to affect how people do post-op. And so for us to be able to treat the heart, yes, that's part of it, but we also have to figure out how does the system that we exist in, that we work in, help the whole patient. And that's why as a surgeon, even as a sub specialist, I still really come back to like the history and physical exam because there's all the models in the world right now still can't replace that, you know?
Yeah, it's so true. And it gets back to, like you said, listening to the patient, giving them space to be heard. And that's really the heart of it, right?
Yeah.
So let's shift over to chronic stress. High performing women juggle careers, caregiving, and emotional labor, like we were talking about. So, what does chronic stress do physiologically to the cardiovascular system?
So there's multiple different biochemical pathways we could talk about in terms of how stress negatively affects the heart. But I also think that the biggest thing I see as a surgeon in my practice is chronic stress leads to habits that secondary habits that cause the stress to actually more I would argue, and this may be a controversial statement, more so than even any biochemical pathways. I think the biggest thing is women who are chronically stressed tend to not pay as much attention to their diet intake. We're dealing with a lot more excessive eating, particularly as a soothing mechanism. We're dealing with less exercise because there's just no time. We're dealing particularly unique to women, taking care of themselves last. So you're running yourself so thin, taking care of your kids and your husband and all these other people. And then you get completely depleted. So there's less sleep. The diet is worse. There's less exercise, and those all compound. And I'm not even talking about the other toxic habits that women pick up. Like I had a woman that I operated on that, you know, quit smoking, right? And I was so happy she did, and I congratulated her. And then, sure enough, she had this major life stressor, and she sees me 6 weeks post op, and she's smoking again. And that's because, you know, she's in this marriage, right? She's getting like no help. So her husband's like another kid for her, and she's taking care of these teenage children. And then there was like an issue with her house too. And long story short, without going into all the details, but yeah, she started smoking again. And so smoking is going to negatively telling her, and I'm like, I don't want to add to your stress, but like I just did these grafts and now you're smoking and these are fresh grafts. So you see these, yes, we get stressed out, and yes, there's like
Yeah.
neurochemical things going on, but really these like it causes these very practical things that like exponentially compound and negatively affect heart health.
Yeah. That's so true. That's so sad, but it's so common, and we see it all the time. Let's switch gears a little bit to fear and performance and your great new book, The Heart of Fear. So it explores internal conflict in high pressure careers. What inspired you to write it?
I think so. The biggest thing is to me asking like, how do you do it? And I was like, well, as we are, I'm a product of my life and the people that I've interacted with, and I'm like, okay, who have I learned the most from, and how do I translate those lessons to others? And I knew that it would resonate at least with the students that were coming to find me. There were people finding me on LinkedIn, online that were like, well, okay, you seem to still be happy, right? You seem to still be thriving, and you're doing well. And I love my job, so that's a big part of it. But I was like, well, but why? Because there's surgeons that are very, very good surgeons but get burned out easily, and they can't seem to get past some of these like stressors as far as like being modern day physicians. And so it comes down to a mindset thing for me. At the core of my practice personally as a cardiothoracic surgeon is my relationship with the patients. Like I really do see it as a calling, and seeing people at the bedside and examining them post-op and talking to them. And I have a very close relationship with my patients. I get to, much like you do, I imagine, but like I get to know them and their families, and they follow up with me over a long period of time. And in a high stakes field, not every day is going to be a good day, and there are some patients that are going to come in and just be in these really bad situations. Like they're coming in shock, and the mortality is going to be high, and we do see some of that, but how does it all work together? And that's really what I explore. And it's not always doctors that I've learned from in terms of how to metabolize some of this in a way that's healthy. And, I think existentially, right? Like we're all asking ourselves, like, what's the most that I can do? So I love doing my cases and I love being a surgeon, but I think more than that, I want to teach other people what I've learned, and it's not going to resonate with everybody, right? Like it's not. Not everyone's going to appreciate my advice, and not everyone's going to, want to go be a skydiver either. Like I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that there's there's something in um there's something in there for somebody that wants that lifestyle. And like I always tell my students, when you're looking for a mentor, right? Like you don't look for somebody that can do what you do. That's important, but you're going to get that in training. Like you're going to get someone that can teach you how to sew in circles. The most important thing is like look for someone who has the life that you want, and try to learn from them, like see how to replicate that life. So for those people who reached out to me who want the lifestyle that I want, this is a great book that explores how I did it and my experience, and some pretty useful mindset adjustments that I think serve you well in terms of avoiding burnout and remaining happy while doing this kind of work.
I love it. What do you think the biggest misconception is that people have about fear?
I think, it's funny. I did this, I don't know if you saw, like I did an Instagram post where my daughter's like riding a bike, and she's basically riding a bike and she falls, and I'm like, "Are you all right?" And she's like, "Oh, it's okay, mom. I learned how to fall." And I'm like, "Okay, what do you mean?" She's like, "Well, you put your foot." She had like a mechanism for it. She's like, I put my foot out, and then the bike falls and I roll out of the way of the bike." And then I started thinking back when I was learning how to skydive, like in my first 50 jumps or so, we had something called the PLF, which is very similar, which is basically learning how to fall. So I think there's this misconception that we have to avoid things that are scary and avoid risk. But really, that's the threshold to any next level that you have in your life. It's actually anticipating that and working with the fear. And I would argue also seeking that out. So I would say instead of running from it, it's how can I embrace that? Like, what am I afraid of? And how can I work with that in a healthy way? And so avoiding risk and avoiding fear, particularly in medicine, I think is important because we're kind of trained that way, right? Like we're trained to avoid
Right.
all of these bad things. But I'll give you an example of how that doesn't work. So, particularly as our population gets older and sicker, we're going to end up operating on people that are older and sicker. So, if you're going to use the traditional risk models and say somebody's prohibitive risk for surgery, like then people are just going to die that could have otherwise had surgery. So, how do we accept that risk? Like what resources do we have? So for example, as our national data has actually now echoed as well, we use mechanical support to do so ECMO and temporary LVAD devices to do high risk cardiac surgery. And we're seeing that they're doing well compared to, and it's hard because you're comparing apples and oranges, right? But at the same time, we're seeing that these people are now surviving that were traditionally referred to hospice, for example, or not getting surgery at all. And now we're able to get them not only to survive, but even back to their lives. So that's an example of, okay, yes, we have this high risk population, but we need to figure out how to take care of them. And that's an example of working with risk as a physician, as opposed to using risk as a reason to not do something and to say that, it stops progress, it stops evolution, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that fear of being risk averse, and that fear of fear almost
keeps people from definitely moving forward. So, what do you think? What's one piece of advice you can give to people who feel stuck or afraid to make a major change? Because I think that fear keeps, it keeps people tied up in situations and stuck in situations they don't want to be in, and or it really is. It's a big inhibitor for progress in all aspects of our life. So, what would you recommend for listeners from what you've done and what you've seen to make a major change? Like, what would you say to them? A
I think
practical strategy that they could use today to move forward.
most of your limiting beliefs are internal, and a lot of it has to do with the thoughts and what you're listening to. And unfortunately, and this goes for, I'm sure, many other fields, but in medicine, right? A lot of the culture can be very toxic, particularly training. So as a trainee, you're absorbing this content, or you can call it content, you can do it on social media. You also absorb this real life content of, people that had a lot of trauma in their training. So they're giving it to you, and you sort of internalize that and turn it into yourself. So I think that step number one is to notice that. So how everything really stems from how you talk to yourself and how you view problems. And so step one is just today, you can just notice what you're saying to yourself and what you're thinking. And you don't have to do anything else from that. But from once you actually become aware of that, and then you can start asking yourself questions like, whose voice is that? Like, that's not like I didn't, when I was 6 years old, I didn't think that way about myself. Like, whose
Yeah.
voice is that? But I think most people, we're on autopilot, right? Like, we're not noticing our thoughts, and how we process our thoughts is how we interact with our external world. And without getting too existential about it, we call in different versions of different people based on how we, oh, okay. All right. Based on how we interact with our world. So, like, I called in a version of you when I
Yeah.
met you at KSI, right? And that version of you and I talking and having this podcast. But had I been somebody that didn't really want to get out there and didn't really want to share my story in the world and didn't have the confidence to say, hey, this is valuable advice, I would have never had that interaction with you. And then this never would have come to be. So you create a lot of your external circumstances. And I think a lot of people don't want to admit that. So it's notice and name your thoughts. That's a really great first step. Most people are still not doing it. It sounds simple, but if you actually are vigilant about it, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, that's such a fascinating way to look at things. And I agree. And I think also, too, I think a lot of what we want is just on the other side of that fear, and just walking through it is what the biggest challenge is. And not just fear, it's also sometimes fear of failure that holds people back. And I think a lot of people don't realize that failure is the best possible teacher and tool. That we certainly see that a lot in medicine, but it's hard for people to get a grasp on that, and to make that change or take a risk or take a step.
The good thing about failure, right, is it's like once you've hit that, there's nowhere, you're almost free, right? Like, there's nowhere else. Like, once you fail,
Yeah.
okay, well, is that it? Like, okay, now you're here. It's almost like a relief. I don't know if you felt this before, but it's almost like
Yeah,
you feel like a relief.
absolutely.
Want now. Now I'm free to do what I want. It can't get any worse than this, and then that's where creation comes from.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's so true. So true. So let's get back to skydiving. You mentioned it briefly. You're a skydiver. You've done, I think, over 200 jumps. What does
Right.
jumping out of a plane teach you? 500 jumps?
Yeah.
500 jumps. Oh my God. You're amazing. What does jumping out of a plane teach you about fear that nothing else can?
I think it's less about fear and more about internal flow. Is as I always say, there's no such a thing as multitasking in cardiac surgery. There's not. And I also have this running that if I wasn't a cardiac surgeon, I don't know what else I would be, because it's this place where you're like completely cocooned, right? Doing one thing at once, and you have like this entire team just there to support you, and you're very shielded from the outside world. Like, you need to get past, the phone calls are answered by nurses. Like, there's nothing that can get to you. But it really allows you to access this like flow state where you're just hyper focused on this one thing in front of you. And it's very similar to skydiving because the stakes are so high. and your mind literally can't be anywhere else. It's you're doing one thing at once. Like I'm doing my gear check on the ground. I'm doing my gear check again in the plane. I'm running my flight plan. Like I know what the winds are and I know exactly what I'm doing, whether I'm jumping with myself or other people, or it's a coaching jump. Or whatever I'm doing, I know everyone in the plane, I know the order that I'm exiting. And that's my complete focus. And it's being able to switch into that mode and out of this mode of that we've been taught, of this multitasking mode. And multitasking is a horrible technique to do anything. And like, I don't believe in multitasking. I believe like just doing one thing at once and being successful at that thing. And also having a positive perspective on perhaps, didn't get to everything that day, but you did the things that you did very, very well. And so skydiving really taught me how to tap into that. But there's other things you could do too. Like I've had conversations with my friends that do yoga and meditate or do Reiki, and they've achieved very similar states, or even taking like walks, like hikes. So for me, it was skydiving, but it could be that for anybody. It's like, how do you get into that flow state where you can be that best version of yourself?
Yeah, that is beautiful. I love it. I've never done skydiving before, but if I were to do it, I'd probably do it with you. It sounds fun, and terrifying. Yeah, you'd have to like talk me down. Let's talk about your legacy. So you're a daughter of immigrants, a mother, and a surgeon. What legacy do you hope to leave for your daughter?
That's a heavy question. I
I
feel like
know.
I like getting right to the real talk, like um for me, it's the permission that I really give my daughter to be who she is, because a lot of how I've lived my life has been not the exact straight path with conventional standards. And I definitely, not everything's perfect every day. I don't get everything done every day. I try to like reference my to done list to like remind myself that yes, I did do a lot today, just didn't do it all. And I have a very positive viewpoint on that. So I do feel like, particularly even with my friends, who are the demographic of most of my friends were like predominantly female professional women, right? And so a lot of them I notice have this like very negative viewpoint on the things that they need to get done and not having enough done, and like feeling mom guilt, whether that be mom guilt or other types of guilt, just feeling guilt. And I'm like, you know what? I don't have that problem. And I've worked hard on that. That's like, I don't feel guilt. Like I feel good about the things I've done. I don't feel guilt. And even when I miss, every once in a while, a case runs late, like it did this morning. Case ran late, so I was late to the podcast. Well, sometimes a case runs late and I miss an event at kindergarten, and that's just it. But you know what? And that's upsetting, sure. But at the same time, I do feel like it gives her permission to that. And she's like, what? Mom, like, doesn't make it all the time. Mom doesn't do it all. But you know what? She doesn't feel bad about it. And that gives her permission to not do that in her life. So I hope that she learns by example. And I always joke around and I tell her the greatest gift that you get from me is that I'm your mom. But in all seriousness, what
Yes.
it means, I realize that she takes that attitude that, there's always something to celebrate. There's always something to focus on that's good. And so that's really my legacy for her. And I think that talking career wise for my students, the legacy really is there's so much negative. Even now, there's so many negative things about being a woman in surgery. And literally I log into Facebook and I'm like seeing all this stuff about like women are still underpaid and women are like, yeah, all that's true. Right. Okay. But can we talk about the good stuff, right? Like, can we talk about the good part of being a woman in medicine and surgery? And we can. And so that really is what I want my legacy to be. But when it comes to women who want to pursue medicine and particularly cardiothoracic surgery and career wise for my patients as well, like it's to continue to move the needle. So I'm very lucky. I get to see it from both sides. Like I get to go to operate and do my cases, and then I get to come out and then share those perspectives and hopefully move the needle in both those ways in cardiac care, not just in San Diego, but even bigger than that, right? And so I get to do that. So that really is what I want my legacy to be. And the best part about it is even talking to you now, I'm like, I think I'm already living that, which is great. It's just more of it.
You are. You definitely are. You exude all of those things, all of that positivity and all of that power in that heart. It's really beautiful to see. This has been an awesome conversation. I'm so impressed by you. I don't meet a lot of happy doctors. I feel I always say I feel like I'm the only happy doctor out there, but now I've met another one. I feel truly blessed to have met you and to have had this conversation. It's very, very inspiring. So let's just wrap up real quick. I know you're really busy. We'll do a quick little lightning round. What's your favorite way to reset after a hard day?
Huh. I think a hot shower, honestly. It's very simple, but I think just sensory for me, it's getting into like the senses and out of the mind. Right?
Yeah.
Anything that drops the senses. So like the hot water hitting your skin, right? It drops you into the senses. Or that can be, I imagine like if I did a cold plunge, I don't have access to a cold plunge, it would be similar. It's like anything that gets me out of my mind and into my body.
Okay, good. What's a one daily habit that you swear by?
So this one is out of for me getting stuck. So like for example, I hate doing notes. Like I hate documentation. I hate like billing, any of that. It's the bane of my existence. So for me, it's like little things like that I gotta work on. So I do a deployment step for things I want to do to get me started because we have evidence once you get something started, you can actually keep going. It's just a matter your brain doesn't want to start it. So for me, I think of it like with skydiving, like when you throw out the pilot chute and it catches air and then it opens your container and deploys your main parachute. So I'm like, okay, what's my deployment steps? I'm like, I have to do the deployment step. It has to be easy. The rules are it has to be easy and it has to take less than 5 minutes. So oftentimes for me, it's like I log into Epic. Like I'm like, I don't have to do anything else. To do a single note, trick my brain. My deployment step, I'm just logging in, right? And you can do this with anything you don't want to do or task that seems onerous. Like you want to buy a house, like today I'm getting a Zillow account or today I'm finding a real estate. Like it has to be short
Baby
and it has
steps. Yeah.
it has right. So way to trick my mind is the baby step, right? But it's like a very methodical way of going about it.
I love it. I love that. What's one belief that has completely changed your life?
One thing I think that is really here all the time that like it's internal things are all in your mind and what you think is really what you are. Like you hear these things, even our parents were saying when we were growing up, and you're like, yeah, whatever, right? But when you actually viscerally feel that and you start to really embody, for example, when you have something that you want to do and it's about embodying the identity of this person that wants to do that thing. So for me, I'm very detailed about it. Like I'll write out, say I have a goal, climbing, like right now, like I'm working on climbing a mountain I want to climb. And I'm like, okay, I want to, like, what does this person do? How do they work out? What do they eat? Like, what is this version of me that climbs this mountain? What does she look like? And I get very detailed about it. And then I start doing those things. And it's really my belief that once and it's changed my life because it's worked for me very well, but once you embody that identity, you can then be the person that does those things. And this goes way back into like people have been talking about this for years, right? Neville Goddard was talking about it, manifestation back in like the 1950s and 60s. So this is like not new, but it's actually
Right.
when you get yourself to do it and you try it and you actually feel the effects of it rather than just hearing it, it's really something that can change the trajectory of your life.
That's very powerful. We say this all the time. You become what you surround yourself with, and not just these echo chambers that we're stuck in like social media, and the people that we surround ourselves really affect our perception of ourselves and our own negative self-talk that really keeps us down. So that I think what you're saying is so important. Okay, besides obviously The Heart of Fear, what's one book everyone should read?
My daughter's coming out with a book called The Book of a Bunny's Life, which is written about her rabbit.
Okay, that's the one.
That's the one. That's the one.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah. There's so many.
How old is she?
She's 6.
Oh, so great. That's awesome. I love
Yeah.
it. Yeah, she's gonna be a force to be reckoned with. I know that. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for your time today. I know you're incredibly busy. This has been such a powerful and beautiful conversation, and I'm so excited to share it with the world. And I've learned so much today that well, Let's see, I have a little list of all the things we learned is, that women deserve to understand their cardiac risks. They deserve to feel empowered. They deserve to be heard when something's wrong. That fear isn't weakness, it's information. And that when it's understood, it becomes our strength. So for those listening, we're going to link Dr. Alexandra Kharazi's book, Heart of Fear, her website, alexkharazi.com, her social platforms, Instagram at Alexandra Kharazi, MD. Let's see, we've got TikTok at Heart of Fear, Facebook, Alexandra Kharazi. There's lots of ways to get a hold of this fabulous woman. If this episode resonated, please share it with a woman in your life. This is the Kind Revolution, where science meets courage and medicine meets humanity. I'm Dr. Georgine Nanos. Thank you so much, Dr. Kharazi, and see you next time.
Thanks for joining the Kind Revolution. If this gave you something real, hope, perspective, or a fresh way to think about health, please share it, subscribe, and pass it on. Medicine won't change on its own, but together we can reimagine it and build something smarter, kinder, and create a system that truly heals. This is the Kind Revolution with Dr. Nanos, where science meets compassion and the future of medicine gets brighter one conversation at a time. Thanks for joining the revolution.